open it up to questions. Do we have any questions? Yes?
Yeah, I was curious, could you talk about the process of adding the images and building out the app?
Of course.
Yeah.
So, way back when Night Film was simply an idea, it was always conceived in a way where there were a lot of different voices. And when I was first talking to my agent about Night Film, I presented her not with a beginning, a middle, and end, or even any characters, or even any plot, or mood, or anything like that. I gave her this scrapbook, and it was filled with Scott's notes about a biography that he was writing about Cordova, because this was before he'd become an investigative journalist, way back when he was simply a writer. It was compiled of documents and photographs and newspaper clippings. So it always had this voyeuristic archival feel to it from the very beginning. And so over the course of sitting down to actually write the book, that was always a part of the storytelling. It was just there from the inception. So as I was writing, I designed my own articles. But of course, when I finally turned that into my publisher, I didn't have rights to any of those images because I had just gleaned them off the internet. So I ended up working with a design team based in London after I had completed the novel. And they helped me curate each piece, which was really like a work of art. And when they appear in the narrative, I was definitely sensitive to allowing readers to take a break from the narrative in order to peruse in a very tactile way documents from this investigation. So they were always there from the get-go. The app, on the other hand, was there at the very end when I had turned in the manuscript. The nature of the Night Film world, it's basically like a planet, and there are a lot of stories within stories. So it was Random House who came to me with the idea of an app. And then together we figured out how it would be experienced. And it was really important to me that while I love innovation, and I love breaking boundaries, and I love where we are right now in terms of content creation, and the idea that as a writer, we can, of course, have the novel, but the internet and handheld devices allow us to give life in another dimension to the story. So it was a lot of experimentation. It was really important to me that readers download the app after they have read the book. I certainly did not write Night Film with the idea that during the reading process people would pick up a phone, because that's the last thing that I would like to do as a reader. I just want to be with the book. I don't want to have to log in anywhere. I don't want to have to worry about having an internet connection. So all of that, it was basically curating that experience. Also, all of the content is supplemental. So there are mysteries within mysteries, and Night Film is a book that is basically stories within stories. So all of the content in the app are supplemental stories. Nothing is intruded upon. No main character is given life or dramatized or cast in the content, because I wanted the reader's imagination to be first and foremost the important goal. So it was really just curating all of that content, and at times it felt like it was like Orson Welles in the Mercury Theater. Like I had my voiceover talent that we would like go into Random House and do recordings, and because we also did found footage films that are found online. So it was really having a band of actors and being able to collaborate with them, and that was just a great experience because I have the most incredible job on earth, but some of the solitude is the one thing that I don't love. So to have this collaborative aspect was fantastic. Yes, any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned solitude. So
yes.
I'm curious to know about your writing process. Like, do you have a study or what do you like to do?
I do. Well, it has changed from book to book. So for special topics, I was working full-time as a consultant. So it was really about finding time, whatever window of opportunity I had to write, I would fill it with writing. I would write at work, which is why I plotted it with Excel spreadsheets, so my boss would walk by my cubicle and think that I was actually doing work, when in fact I was writing. But when I would have the time to write, I required office in silence, and I had a very closeted, reclusive writing experience. And I knew for moving forward, because writing is important, but I like to be within the world and having experiences and travel. So I taught myself to get away from that sense of being entirely cloistered in the dark with a laptop. And if anyone played music, you know, my concentration was completely messed up with special topics. But with night film, I trained myself to be much more fluid. So basically, my schedule is Monday through Friday, 9 to about 4, and about half the time I will write in my home office, because I have an office within my apartment in New York City. And then the other times I'll be traveling. I have my secret haunts and cafes in Manhattan that I'll go to and spend the day writing. I love libraries. I love traveling abroad and working in hotels, and just having that really organic, wild, chaotic life experiences around you, because I have found that really feeds your writing, and then ideas will percolate into your writing in unexpected ways. Yes?
I have two, actually. So, how did you outline something like this? Because it sounds like a book within a book within a book.
Yeah.
And the other question is, did you really have like 90 rejections before you found it? I read that in
I think 90 was a bit, there is something called like overstating something. It felt like 90 at the time, but it was probably 10. Okay, to answer your first question, I did not, in contrast to Special Topics, where I needed a lot of scaffolding because it was technically my third novel, but I wanted to know specifically where I was going in terms of plot. So then when I was actually writing it, I wouldn't be stressed out like, oh, not only do I have to write really good prose, I don't know where on earth this is going. So I did have that blueprint for me in place. But for night film, I wanted to throw all that out, because I knew from experience that a book has a life of its own, and it really starts to grow and morph in unexpected ways during the writing process, which in this case was about 3 years. So I wanted to allow that process to inform me in terms of what the underlying truths would be. So I allowed this to be much more of a fumbling in the dark. At the same time, I did do a lot of world building in terms of the backstory of this reclusive filmmaker, Stanislav Cordova. I knew everything I could possibly know about this man. I knew about his family, I knew about his mother, I knew about where he grew up, and I knew so much about his 15 films. If they're considered the most horrifying films ever made, I felt that I couldn't cut corners as the creator just by telling readers that. I had to believe that myself. And I think when that is real to the author, it will permeate the page. So I did a lot of world building, but within that world I didn't exactly know what the underlying truths would be until I began that writing process. And then I would hone in on a twist or a turn, and then that would become real. I'd make a note of it, and then of course go back to the manuscript and readjust. But
you didn't have one in?
I did not. No, I didn't. I didn't. I think I had the original conceit that I wanted to take a rational man and over the course of a dark odyssey allow him and force him to believe in things that he never would believe in, and to question things that he never thought he would question, and taking him to the edge of the edge as far as he could possibly go, and then at that moment trying to figure out what he discovers. So I knew I had to take myself there, but I didn't know what it was going to be until basically the 11th hour.
It was great. It was really rich.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes?
So I know that as an author, like you probably have a lot of people looking at the manuscript before you actually finalize everything. How often, because you keep the work so close to you, do you have a lot of people influencing your work when they give you feedback, or is it mostly you?
Well, each writer that is a very personal experience. I like to, there's a quote in Night Film where one of the characters is talking about what an artist needs to create, and she's talking about having a dark room and an anonymity. And that for me is crucial, because I have to feel a lack of self-consciousness, and I have to feel freedom. Freedom to make mistakes, freedom to be terrible, freedom to be brilliant, just freedom to play, basically, and to be creative. So that inherently means for me that at the outset, I don't have a lot of people reading my work until I've reached a point that I'm ready for a lot of feedback. I do have one reader, and that's my mom. She's a very well-read individual. She knows me very well. We see eye to eye on a lot of things, and conversely, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but she's always willing to challenge me. She's brutally honest, so she tells me when something is working and she tells me when something is not. So I think it's always good to have at least one person, one right-hand man or woman, to be in that creative stage, maybe not in that dark room with you, but right outside the door so you can come out and be like, okay, am I crazy? What do you think about this? Getting a lot of feedback in that way is crucial. At the point where I feel I have a somewhat polished work, at that point I'll get a lot of creative feedback. And I had, when I turned in the rough draft of Night Film, I had my editor and then 2 assistant editors reading it. And it's great to have really specific feedback in that way and to have a lot of different voices. And unlike special topics where I was very oversensitive and this was my child and, you know, no one could touch it or come within, like, you know, a yard of this thing, no one could breathe on it. It was like my savior, my everything. This, I'm much more fluid. I like to have a lot of people in, you know, reading it, because I find the reader's experience, I mean, there's the experience that an author has with writing a book, and I think inherently you have questions that you're trying to wrestle to the ground, so it's inherently a personal thing. But at the same time, after that, the reader's experience is really important to me, and I need to know if something is lagging and if it's not. And you really only understand that, especially if you're writing a mystery like me, if you have people reading your work constantly. Any other questions? Yes?
So the 17 films that you did,
15, yeah.
How did you come up with the ideas? Because I thought it was very fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
And the movie posters as well. It was really cool how
oh, good.
all, like,
so you did download the app? Oh, so you got all the posters. Okay, cool. So how did I come up with them?
Yes.
Well, in the same way that I was coming up with an idea for a novel. And I thought, I love film. I love psychological thrillers. And I watch a lot of horror films and terror films and everything from David Lynch to early Roman Polanski. So that was like getting me in the world of Cordova. But I set out to, I think a lot of writing is drifting and letting your imagination sort of bob around an ocean and seeing what you happen to swim into and just allowing that to take as long as it takes. So with Cordova's work, I knew that it had to be different, it had to be horrifying. I had to uproot everything that I had ever seen in a commercially released film and find out what would be X-rated, what would be R-rated, what would be terrifying to put on a screen. And of course, what I found out was that what doesn't actually appear on the screen is infinitely more terrifying than anything overt. So it was really just getting in that mindset and letting myself drift, and the stories really developed from that process. Yes?
Can you talk about the experience of spending time in archives and what's good about what's your favorite part about spending time in archives and what's your least favorite part about spending time in archives? Assuming you spend time in archives.
You mean everything from libraries to estate sales and what I talked about in terms of loving, like, trawling through all of that. What I get at it, well, it was interesting because I spent a lot of time when I was world building of what the world of Night Film was going to be. I spent a lot of time in the Butler Stacks of Columbia Library, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's incredibly claustrophobic. And I was always in the witchcraft and devil worshipping sections, so I was usually the only person there. And all the lights are on timers, so you're trawling through these books that when you pull one out, it hasn't been checked out since like 1942 or something. And you know, they're surrounding you. I mean, it does start to take on a somewhat cinematic quality of a horror movie, especially because the lights are all on timer. So I would start like pulling the books out and standing there reading them, and all of a sudden the lights would flicker off. Then I would have to like fumble my way to the end of the stack, like waiting to just like brush someone's face who's like standing there waiting for me to kill me. There's something about physical books. I mean, I love physical books. I love the things that we leave behind when we're no longer there. Whether it's a book that we checked out in a library, someone checked out in 1942, but their stamp is there. The splatter of coffee that they were drinking as they read is like slapped onto the page. I mean, that ephemera is so powerful. And I was just reading about this new library that had been built, and it's a modern library and it has no books. And it's this completely like sanitized operating room where kids are meant to go in and learn. And I know that it might sound archaic to say that that's so sad, but I mean, there's something about the physicality of learning that is so important, and having the book in your hands, and having old wedding photos around you to remember how your grandmother lived and loved and lived her life. And you know, those remnants that we leave in our life are incredibly powerful. So I think that they tell really magnetic stories, and I hope we don't lose those things, or physical books. Yes?
You just mentioned in your first novel using an Excel spreadsheet to map it out. What did you plug in? How did it work?
What did you say?
What did you plug into the cells? How did it work?
Oh, well, I can go into specifics, but it was basically like chapter 1, and then and then it would be all the events that happened, and then I would have another worksheet for all the characters and the character names. And so it was really in a very, yes, there are no formulas that I learned to like punch in to like figure out how to write a novel with numbers. So it was like that. But like my boss just cruising by the cubicle would just glance, and it would seem as if I'm doing real work. So yeah. But that format I have since abandoned. I no longer plot according to Excel, so I'm happy about that. Yes?
The black and white picture you in the Examiner, can you tell us maybe when or where that was taken?
I don't know what picture that is. Oh, when was that taken? It was probably taken in December of last year, because all authors need author photos. So, yeah, there's not really a story to that. Yes?
What about the photos of the characters in the book? I mean, were those found photos, or were those...
So we created those like works of art from scratch, and I worked with a graphic design firm based in London called Kennedy Monk, and basically, yeah, we cast Ashley and Cordova, and it was really important that they had faces that were somewhat shadowy so they could be a leaping off point for readers' imaginations. But in that context, I mean, that was that collaborative aspect that I loved so much about working on night film. And each piece needed to have a personality and a tactile quality, and you know, giving a sense that was inherent to the world of the novel that I had already created.
There's some beautiful photographs. They're really well shot.
I know. Well, we worked with this amazing photographer who really understood that we wanted this kind of really organic, light-filled photography that had a sense of movement to it, that all of these people were in motion when they had suddenly been caught on camera and frozen on the page in that way. So he understood that. Yes?
The witchcraft store that is one of the settings in this book. Did you draw in one particular place that you went and researched? Or?
I did. So the witchcraft store called Enchantments is a real place. It's exactly in the same location that they visit in the book. It's in the East Village. I think it's East 9th Street. And it is exactly like all of the descriptions of the store is very much true to life. They deal primarily with white magic, no black magic. And the sign that Scott reads says that we do not deal in black magic, so don't even ask, is a real sign. And the cat that they shoo away from the door named Zero is the cat that lives in Enchantments. So all of those more supernatural, wilder elements that live in the book are all grounded in reality. I tried to make it as specific as possible. So I suggest if you ever make your way to Manhattan, you should visit. And they do have witches on call, but the thing that I made up, of course, was the back room, where things happen. Yes?
What's the story behind the visual aids and special topics?
Oh, now let's walk down memory lane. I can't even remember how they came about. I think it was again born out of Blue's desire to present a thesis of her life, and they're inherently. Oh, I know. I think actually I had references to visuals, but I didn't have the visuals themselves. And my editor had suggested including them, and I had done a few sketches, and somehow those two came together and we ended up having a few visuals. But I don't know why both of my books have had visuals. It just seems to be inherent in the kind of story I'm telling, but we'll see about the third if I do that again. I don't know. Anyone else? Yes?
Did you draw on one particular location for the peak?
I did. Well, I had visited the Adirondacks many times, and I knew the history of Rockefellers and other prominent families throughout the early 20th century building homes there and having them as vacation resorts. And I just thought that was interesting to have very luxurious compounds in such a wild setting. That was really, that discrepancy began to be really interesting to me. Especially at some point, the maintenance of these grand estates couldn't be maintained. So what happens when it falls into disrepair? And of course I loved the idea of a compound where an artist creates art end to end and invites select people to come to that island, really. So I had a history of that environment, and then my imagination took over. Thank you all so much. It was wonderful. Thank you.